So excited for our micro training today on really leveraging the power of your story to expand your business and take yourself from being a service provider or this feeling of like being a transactional business to being the leader of a movement. And super briefly about me. So my name is Brittany Hammond and I'm the founder of Untamed Productions. I've literally been doing this work for over a decade. I have helped hundreds, if not thousands, of women share the power of their story. I am an award-winning performer, filmmaker. I have built two businesses to six figures and beyond. I have a double master's degree in film, psychology, and communication. And I want to really honor your time and make this training really valuable, something that you can tune in, get a takeaway, implement it in your business, and really see that ripple effect. But first, I just want to rewind a little bit because obviously this is about storytelling. So we know that there's tons of stats around why storytelling is more effective and efficient than just sharing facts. And to be honest, I'm more of like you know, for me, like teaching on why you should be telling story isn't really the funnest part for me. Like I love actually like diving in with you and picking out those key moments of your story and how we can like flip it back and, add in the emotional impact to really inspire your audience, not just to feel inspired, but to activate them. So first and foremost, I am someone who has carried the witch wound in this life, who has dealt with being misunderstood, who has had to heal from a lot of childhood abuse. And so something that really drives me is this fierce desire to communicate effectively, right? And I always say that like our biggest wound is our greatest gift. And so to be able to have studied communication at the level that I have and the importance of story, has really been something that has carried me through some of those harder moments when I was younger, because when I was growing up, I didn't have mentors. I didn't have the parenting or someone to really teach me. And so I looked at stories as my mentors. I looked at movies and TV shows and saw this is the world, this is how people interact. So that's kind of where my initial love for stories came from. And I actually have a reel on my Instagram, which is I am Brittany Hammond, where I talk more about that more deeply. It's also in my human design and my gene keys. I think it's gate 56, like that I'm the natural storyteller. So I just truly believe that part of my soul purpose in this life is to share stories, not just sharing stories to sell and grow your business, but sharing stories to heal. So I believe that the most powerful stories either activate a truth within, they create some type of perspective shift, they can unearth a remembering, they can spark an epiphany, they can activate self-reclamation, or stories really give us that unspoken to spoken permission. Like when we hear someone else's story and we're like, it just like awakens something in us. And I really think that that's the true power of it. So why storytelling? Let me just brush past this because it is important. But there is this psychological phenomenon that no one wants to be blatantly sold to. The second we feel like we're being sold to, our defenses go up because we feel like we're going to be manipulated. We feel like someone's going to try and like go past our consent and change our viewpoint. And so the reason why story is so impactful in our business is because it's a way of actually selling to people without actually directly selling to them. Because the point of a story, right? These reasons that I just listed off, like one of the key ones is stories help shift a perspective. And what is it that we're doing when we're selling? We're showing people, we're offering them a solution to something, right? I'm obviously sharing this in the context of, I'm assuming a lot of us here are, online creative entrepreneurs. in the space of personal growth and health and wellness and spirituality and all of that. And so we are here to be the beacon of light and help people see things a different way. And that's why story really bridges that gap. As well, stories go right past that like defense mechanism and they go straight to emotion. And yeah, there are some people that buy on logic, but the like story is actually what moves us. And I don't know what percentage or what stat there is, but people buy from emotion, right? And so when you could tell a compelling story that someone sees themselves in that, you are just going to simplify your sales like crazy. But it's not just about sales. So we're going to kind of break down the different types of stories. So before I dive into that, there are 2 reasons why your stories or storytelling efforts in your business might not be landing and how to shift right now. So the number one thing I see people doing when they're trying to share a story in the context of their business is that they are making it all about them. And they are forgetting this key point of how to flip the mirror back to their audience. How can the audience, like, why does it matter to your audience? How can they see themselves in that story? And it's a really, really simple shift that, say you're writing a post and you're sharing a story, all you have to do is mid post is just flip it back from an I statement to a you statement, right? And like spell it out, connect the dots, ask people a prompting question, right? Because once they see themselves in the story, they not only see what's possible, but we have to remember that like when we're sharing a story, unless we're sharing it to be witnessed and maybe in the context of like you're speaking or you're writing a personal memoir, which is a bit different, but the point of the story is to show someone a different way of living, thinking, believing, right? And so it's really more about them. And this is a skill to be cultivated, by the way. And as someone who studied story, this is one of the biggest things that I also had to learn in my business was how to like flip it back to the audience. Because when we're telling a story, we have those neuro mirrors in our brain, because naturally our brain, when we're listening to someone, is gonna start scanning to how does that relate to me. I'll give you guys a really quick example through storytelling. I was just listening to a podcast around the law of assumption, and the host was telling a story about how her son like was on this soccer team and he was manifesting like going up a rank or something rather. And I'll skip the details of the story, but because it's not relevant in the context of this, but she was sharing her son's thought process of like he already assumed that he was going to be upgraded. He just didn't know how or where or what team. And so this is where the neural mirror went off in my brain, because I didn't relate to that story, but what I did relate to was yes, the law of assumption, assuming that what you want is already yours. And so for me, I'm in the process of buying my first home in Paris, and I've had those little doubts and fears creep in, and I'm like, no, but you know that it's going to happen. And so again, storytelling as well is to support a core message. So this was I wasn't even planning on talking about this, but it was a great example of someone sharing a story, which the core message was around the law of assumption. But the story, like, had she not shared that story and just talked about the law of assumption, it wouldn't have had the emotional impact, right? So that mirror effect is really important. And then the other little pitfall I see is when you're missing that clear overarching message, which actually is a great segue, because the story is getting drowned in details that things might not be relevant. So often when I'm working with my clients, I can see that they're getting caught up in all of these details. They think that they need the whole backstory, but really, like, powerful stories can just be even a couple of sentences. And so it's really, really honing in on what actually is the message and what is a supporting story that's going to express that. And there really is an art to taking someone on that journey, that, hitting those subconscious points, those subconscious beliefs, and the emotional triggers. And so what I have found is that there are 3 core story types in business that not only just someone as a projector, like, because I, have that skill of being able to like zoom back and see things and break them down into like little bite-sized teachings, but the three stories that I see. So the first one is the soulful story, and these are stories that are meant to inspire. They're moments that are going to open our hearts. They're going to connect with us emotionally. They're going to connect with the audience on a deeper level and let people feel you and see you more than anything. And soulful stories are definitely in the context of, if you're a speaker, if you're speaking on stage, especially at like an event where there's a certain theme, or, if you're writing a personal memoir. I have clients who are writing their own story, and it's going to be more of like a soul transformation. Um, Especially I find women who are in that space of spiritual growth or personal growth, it's, I think so often we're told that like you have to tell your story to sell. And that's true, but there's stories that you have to tell that are also going to create emotional connection with your audience, because without that emotional connection, um, you're kind of missing that. Like, that's really that bridge. There's so many people that can teach on spiritual law, like, and there is, but it's your unique story that's going to build that connection point for a client specifically because of your unique perspective or the way that you tell the story. And actually, the woman's podcast that I was using as an example, I actually have worked with her as a coach before. So, just further proof that the more you can share stories around what you believe and what you stand for, the more you're going to naturally call in the most aligned people. So the second type of story to really expand and grow your impact beyond just being service based, but thinking like big picture, I want to, start a movement, is the activation story. And we're going to dive deeper into this one today. That's the one story I wanted to like actually give you tangibles with. So the activation story, this definitely is like a, not everyone has this way of showing up and speaking. It's kind of like that fiery energy. There's stories that move people. When you read something and you're like, this just like lit me up, this fired me up, like this gave me the pep talk that I didn't know that I needed. These are really those activating stories that are they're going to spark something within someone. They're going to shift a perspective, they're going to ignite that energy, and they're going to move someone to like take action, whether that be like think differently, do something new, buy from you, right? It's like you got to move. The activation story moves someone. And then the third story is the selling story. And so these are the stories that convert. That's where you're really like, yes, you're sharing the story, but you're building the case as to how these story narratives fit seamlessly into your offer suite, a program, a masterclass, like anything that you're selling. And I find that the selling stories that work really well are the client transformation stories, where you really share with your people, like, this client came to me here and this is what we worked through, the resistance, the challenges, the milestones, and then this is where they ended up. And it has a very clear, like, they started here and they ended up here. Those transformation stories are so great for selling, because when someone's listening, they're thinking, well, if that's possible for them, what's possible for me? So without further ado, I actually don't know if I can share my screen. I'm normally the queen of beautiful slides, but I want to talk about the activating type of story. I want you to think of the most common limiting belief of one of your clients. Now, don't think of one of the ones that annoys you, that you're like, oh, I just don't want to work with these types of people. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Think of a disempowered belief that you're just like, oh, if I could just see them, if I could just help them see it this way, I could like liberate them. I could just change their lives. Like, think of that one belief. And think of that perspective that you want to shift and a different way that you want them to see something. we're looking at this through the lens of disruption, because anytime obviously we're trying to shift someone's perspective and help them see something a different way, we have to identify the pattern. So showing them so identify the pattern, telling them show them how it's happening and why it's happening. That's actually where the story can fit in. And then pulling them out of normal and show them a new way to move forward. So I have, obviously, if you could see this beautiful arc that I have on my screen, but I'll drop it in the comments below for those of you watching the replay. So belief shifting messaging for an activating type story. So what creates a belief shift? So looking, first of all, at the current perspective or belief or viewpoint that they have that is either conscious or unconscious, consciously or unconsciously, like creating a challenge for them. Obviously showing understanding, witnessing them for where they're at. And then you share a story of the transformation. So this could be either a new way of looking at things, a new insight perspective that will help them resolve or transform the perceived challenge. So we're looking at the greatest chance of opening someone's mind to new ideas, new territories, like just a new way of seeing things. Obviously, the story fills that gap, and then it leads that to that aha moment, right? That, oh my gosh, yes, or oh, now I get it, or oh my gosh, this has I feel liberated, right? And it's that subconscious breakthrough that once they see that, then they can move forward. And I think we all have our own expression style. Some people are definitely more fiery in the way that they show up, but you don't have to be triggering or polarizing. I just want to clarify that in this type of, belief shifting. So let me give you an example of this. I had a client last year who was so caught up in her head around trying to tell her story and get her message across and build, her audience. And she was really in her intellect. She was in her head, and she was like, if I could just find the words, right? So that's her belief. That's her limiting current perspective. It's if I could just intellectually find the words, then everything else would fall into place. But really what was happening is that archetype of the good girl or the perfectionist, the good little girl, little Miss Perfect, the perfectionist, the overachiever was stepping in, and it was literally blocking. There was a blockage between her heart and her mind. And it's everything she was saying was coming across stiff. So we've established what her current perspective was. She has this perceived problem. She couldn't get her words out. She thinks that the solution was just finding the perfect words through her intellect, through her mind. And what I offered to her was actually one of my body wisdom practices. It's a movement practice to get out of your head and drop into your body and into your heart, because I believe that the wisdom is in our body, and when we can silence our mind and listen to our intuition, we get those downloads because we've silenced everything else. And I just remember she came back to me and she was like, you're not going to believe it. She's like, you are so right. I see what you mean. I went off and did your body wisdom practice, and everything just channeled through me. And I was like, of course. So obviously your words are important, but your conviction and energy speak louder than words. That would be my core message, right? Your words are important, but your conviction and energy actually speak louder than words. So see how I just shared an example of someone who had a perceived belief. I shared a story of how she worked through it, and then the breakthrough that she had. And what was crazy is because I would see this client after, she's just become a storytelling genius. I think one of her most recent posts had 500 likes, it went viral. And I was like, oh my gosh, so amazing to cheer her on in that way. So this is a sales skill I think that everyone needs to understand. It's just the foundation of any transformational work. So yeah, I just wanted to invite you guys to my Embodiment Story Reels mini workshop. But embodiment stories are these stories that really show who you are, what you stand for, and what you believe. It's a little bit of a mix of the soul story and the activation story and selling. I think all three kind of fit into that category. But they're like the most fun stories I see on Instagram, a reel where you just really see someone embodying who they are and what they stand for. So I'm going to drop the link to that as well. I talk about the sales psychology behind embodiment stories. I actually walk you through how to create like a beautiful cinematic reel on Instagram with B-roll and voiceover and all of that. And then there's some more things about different embodiment story types in there. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper, then you can definitely check that out. But I do encourage you this week, like, take notes with what you learned today and go off and implement it, because these are really simple little shifts that you can implement right now in your business. All right, and with that being said, I wish you a beautiful day, and please reach out to me, connect with me. I am Brittany Hammond on Instagram. I'm here on Facebook, and I would love to serve you further. All right, bisous from Paris. Ciao.